Bonjour. Aujourd'hui, on va discuter les verbes réguliers en ER. So today we're going to discuss regular ER verbs. Vous aurez besoin de votre cahier, bien sûr, un crayon ou un stylo, 3 crayons ou stylos de couleur, so 3 different colors of pen or pencil. Sur papier blanc et sur papier jaune, yours may be different colors. Et du ruban. OK? Bon ben, tenez la prochaine page. Turn to the next page in your notebook, please. Pour moi, c'est la page 19. S'il vous plaît, utilisez votre propre page. So please use the correct page for you. Comme toujours, on va commencer avec la date. C'est le 15 novembre 2016. Et ça, c'est les verbes réguliers en ER, which really means in English regular ER verbs. Okay? Et qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? So what we are going to talk about today are verbs. So what I would like you to do, s'il vous plaît, is to tourner à la section de meta language. So we're going to turn to our meta language section and we're going to add some more definitions. Okay? On va ajouter de l'information. So we are going to add information here. And the first thing we're going to add is a quick definition of a verb. I know you know what a verb is, but this way we're all working from the same definition. So a verb is an action word. Okay? And it's worth actually noting that it agrees with the subject of the sentence. It agrees with the subject of the sentence. Okay? Now there are two types of verbs. There are regular verbs and irregular verbs. So let's add those in here too. Regular verbs, and regular verbs are verbs that follow a pattern. And every single regular verb will follow a pattern. This does not mean that irregular verbs don't follow a pattern, it just means they might follow a different pattern. So they follow a pattern. The same pattern for each group. For each group. Okay? Puis, now we have les verbes irréguliers, so we have irregular verbs. And what makes a verb irregular is that it doesn't follow those patterns that we've set up here for regular verbs. So regular verbs don't follow a pattern. For the most part, they must be memorized. They must be memorized. Okay? Memorized. Bon ben. All right? Okay. Now, along with these, conveniently located at the top of my page, 3 definitions, first, second, and third person, you have most of the vocabulary that you need in order to talk about verbs. Now, with that being said, I'd like to add 2 more words here. One is a noun, and one is a verb. So the first word that you're going to hear a lot of is infinitive. Infinitive. V-E. And an infinitive, this is a very fancy word in French. And it's one of those complicated definitions for something that seems to be super simple. So an infinitive is the basic, unconjugated form of a verb. Well, that seems really unnecessarily complicated, doesn't it? So it's the basic unconjugated form of a verb. This is the dictionary form. It's the dictionary form. Exclamation point. Okay? En français, en français, les infinitifs terminent avec E, R, I, R ou RE. Français. En français, they end with E, R, I, R, I, R, I, R, ou R, E, R, E. Now, it doesn't mean that every word that ends in these letter combinations is a verb or indeed an infinitive, but most of them are, okay? And how do these translate? How do I translate an infinitive? What does this mean? These translate as to blank. And whatever this blank is, it's going to be a verb. To laugh, to jump, to sleep, perchance to dream, all of these are infinitives. And in English, it's to verb. That's how we would deal with them. Now, the next word I'd like to talk about is this word here. Unconjugated is a really, really complicated word. It's kind of scary to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take off my prefix and my suffix, and I'm going to look just at the root word, which is conjugate. And to conjugate is a verb. And what does it mean? And do we do this in English? So those are two really good questions. So to conjugate means to change the verb. To change the verb to match the subject. That's really all it means. You can conjugate in the past, the present, or the future, but it all means that you have to change the verb in some way to match what's going on in your sentence, to match the subject, which you remember is what? Good job, you remember that the subject of the sentence is who or what the sentence is about. Okay, so, puis, tournez la page 19, ou votre page, so turn back to your other page, and we are going to actually deal with regular verbs. Now, when we're dealing with verbs, verbs have a process by which we change them to match the subject. So, s'il vous plaît, we're going to start with this page. Oh là là, moi, j'ai oublié les ciseaux. I forgot scissors. Des ciseaux. Okay, so what I would like you to do is to please cut out the entirety of this square, s'il vous plaît. I'm going to put my notebook aside for a moment while I cut that out. And presto changeo, thanks to some movie magic, we now have this beautiful cutout piece. What I'd like you to do is to split, to just cut on this one line here. Puis, s'il vous plaît, fold them with the writing on the outside, the printing on the outside. S'il vous plaît. So you'll find that this folds down and then this folds up over the bottom, like this. Okay, so you'll have something, they actually call this a double matchbook fold, and it looks kind of like a matchbook if you've ever used one of those. Now, what I'd like to do is to actually label this. How to conjugate ER verbs. Okay. And I'm going to put a smiley face over here because I can. All right, so when we're conjugating verbs, there are two steps. And I'm going to actually label these. Step 1. Step 1. And then this one I'm going to label, you guessed it, Step 2. Step 2. So let's open these up. In case I need to actually go down, I'm going to draw a line here so that I now know where the sides are. So step 1. Step 1. Drop the ER from the infinitive. Okay, I'm going to drop the ER from the infinitive. That works. And then step 2. Step 2. Did I label that one? I did. So 2. Step 2 is add the correct ending. And how am I going to know it's the correct ending? It is the ending that matches the subject. So add the correct ending according to the subject. According to the subject. Okay? All right, so now what we're going to do is we are going to actually add this into our notebooks. So, s'il vous plaît, avec du ruban, attachez le papier ici. Okay? Ok, bon ben, on l'a attaché ici. Okay, so there we are. So these are our steps. Now, in order for us to figure out the next part, we're going to add another foldable into our notes. So, s'il vous plaît, fermez le cahier, so close your notebook and put it aside for the moment. Puis, prenez ce papier, take this paper, and of course cut out the outsides of each of the shapes, and then cut these, just like we did with the matchbook, into 3 little fingers. Come back when you have finished doing that. Okay, presto changeo, thanks to some magie de film, some movie magic, we now have 2 of these that are all cut out and have flip flaps. Okay, and what I would like you to do is to make them face each other like this. Now we're going to label these. We have singular form verbs and plural form verbs, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually label these along this edge. So, s'il vous plaît, label one of these singulier, comme ça, et puis l'autre pluriel. P-L-U-R-I-E-L, pluriel, singulier et pluriel. And then hold them like this. Now, en utilisant les 3 couleurs, so using your 3 colors, color the top one along the edges. Make the top one the same color on both sides. Puis, le deuxième, une autre couleur, so put the second one as being a separate color. Puis, le troisième, une fois encore une autre couleur. So then put the third one being a different color. Okay? So, why don't you do that? Pause the video here, come back quand vous avez fini. Bon ben, thanks to some movie magic, here we are with some colored pieces. Now we are going to put these into our notebooks. So if you would be so kind as to ouvrir les cahiers, puis placer les papiers ici. So we're going to put the papers in here. And we're going to tape them along this long edge. Okay? Comme ça. On va les attacher comme ça. Okay. And I'm going to super tape these because over taping is always a good thing. Right? Or so I tell myself. Okay. Now, once these are taped, we're going to actually fold these over. Comme ça. So, in order to add the endings according to the subjects, because that's what step 2 says. Step 1 says drop the ER, and then step 2 says add the correct ending. And since these are regular verbs, every time I have a regular ER verb, I'm going to add the same ending according to the subject. So what I need, of course, are the subjects, strangely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 3 colors, mes 3 couleurs, bleu, orange et vert, and I'm going to write the subject pronouns on these flaps. Okay? But you'll notice, according to what we had on the previous page, there are 9 subject pronouns. But here, I only have 6 flaps. So how is that going to work? You'll remember that on the previous page, we color-coded them. First person, second person, third person. So that's what we're going to do over here. Using the same color that I used here, I'm going to put my subject pronouns. I have je or J apostrophe, nous. Then for my second person, I have tu and vous. And then for my third person, I'm going to put all of the ones that have the same color over here on each of these flaps. So for singular, I have il, elle, and on. And then for plural, I have il pluriel and elle pluriel. So I should now have une page comme ça. So I should have a page that looks like this. Now, if step 1 is to drop the ER and step 2 is to add the correct ending, let's actually take and write those subject pronouns on the other sides of our flaps, just like we did over here. Okay? So on the other side, using the same color, une fois encore, je, J apostrophe, nous. Oh la la, probably would have been easier to do this before I put them in the notebook, but it's too late now. Tu and vous, vous. I have il, elle, on ici, il, elle, on, which are third person plural, remember? First person, second person, third person. And then over here I have il and elle pluriel. Okay? Now what endings am I going to add? If you've been paying attention in class, then you would have noticed that we actually have been changing things in our sentences depending on who we're talking about. When we had j'aime, our verb ending was e. When we had tu, our verb ending was es. When we have il, elle, on, our verb ending is e. And we've seen all of these forms. Now, the plural forms we have not seen quite as often. For the new form, we're going to drop the ER and we're going to add ONS. For the vous form, we drop the ER and we add EZ. And for the il and elle pluriel form, we drop the ER and we add ENT. Okay, now, because we have not specifically talked about this previously, I am actually going to label each of these with a number. 1. Why did I label these 1? If you thought because they're first person, you are correct, which means that the middle will now be labeled deux for deuxième personne. And then for the green, it's toi for troisième personne. Okay? Now, let's actually flip the page. S'il vous plaît, tournez la page. Puis, let's see how this looks in action by conjugating a verb. So we are going to actually conjugate my student's favorite verb. And my student's favorite verb, of course, is parler. Parler, ça veut dire to speak or to talk. Okay? So, in order to do this, I need to put in all of my subject pronouns so I can see all the forms at once. Even though in a regular sentence I'll only use one at a time, it's still good for us to see all the patterns. So I have je, and I have je because this begins with a consonant and I won't need a J apostrophe. Then I have tu, il, elle, on, nous, vous, il pluriel, et elle pluriel. Okay, now, according to my process, and I'm going to go back here to my process says, step 1, drop the ER from the infinitive. Okay? So when I drop the ER from the infinitive, I'm left with parle, and I'm going to write that next to each of my forms. Okay, so I have that. And then according to my process, step 2 says add the correct ending according to the subject. Wow. Okay, so I have these endings. And what are my endings? S, O, N, S, Z, N, T. These are verbs. Okay, so we have ER verbs. So let's actually add our endings. And according to that little song that I just sang, S, ONS, and that should really be all one word. I did a bad job with my spacing here. OZ, ENT. Hey, look, an ER verb. So, ES, ONS, Z, ENT. These are verbs. So if I wanted to use this in a sentence, like Mr. Romano tells us, Je parle français très fort. As I speak French very loudly. Okay? So I need to use this form of the verb. Okay? All right. Now there's one last thing we need to do. Actually, two things. One, if this was my sentence, how do I make this sentence negative? Do you remember how to make a sentence negative? That's right. We add ne, pas. And we add it on either side of the verb. So if I'm not speaking French very loudly, je ne parle pas français très fort. That I'm speaking French very loudly. Je parle français très fort. And of course, if this is not true, je parle pas français très fort. Now, if you would be so kind as to turn back to meta language for one moment, we need to add one more definition. So, s'il vous plaît, une définition de plus. So, one more definition. And this definition is verb stem. So, verb stem. Okay. The simple definition for this is it's what's left over after you drop the er, ou from the infinitive. From the infinitive. And so let's take our example verb parler. So parler, it has an ER on it, it's an infinitive. If I drop the ER, I have parle. This is my verb stem. Okay? All right, bon ben, s'il vous plaît, tenez à l'indice et ajoutez cette information ici. C'est le 15, 11, 16. Les verbes réguliers en ER. Et c'est page 19 avant. Merci. Au revoir.